So a little while ago, I made a video about rereading Harry Potter, and in that video I spoke about how it took me a long time to work out how to read. Despite both my parents being teachers and my mum spending a lot of time teaching me how to read, I couldn't really read and I wasn't interested in reading until my mum basically forced me to read Harry Potter. Long story short, I became obsessed and I went from being probably one of the worst readers in my class to one of the best, and I read everything under the sun. And so about a year or two later, in my last year of primary school, I won the book award, which was a prize where 2 kids in every class at the end of the year were presented with an award and a book, basically, or books. And I had watched this award be given out my whole primary school life. In my last year, my friend and I were the 2 people chosen from our class, and I was so excited. And I went up to get my books, and they gave me The Hunger Games. And I was devastated because already that year I had promised myself that I was never going to read The Hunger Games. Like, as a child, I was terrified of cartoon kids movies, let alone something like The Hunger Games. When I was still learning how to read, my parents took my family to the movies to see Yogi Bear when it first came out, and I made my dad leave. I would not sit through the whole movie. I was terrified. I forced him to leave. And then a couple months later, we went to see this movie about the Easter Bunny called Hop. It is a cartoon kids movie. My mum was sitting me in the theatre like, it's a story, like there aren't real people, they're cartoon rabbits, like it has a happy ending, you know. And so even as a 12-year-old, I knew that I was not going to be able to read a book like The Hunger Games. But I was so excited to get these books and to win this award, and I got The Hunger Games. And I think a year or 2 later, I did end up reading the first one. I've definitely read the first one, and I've seen the first movie. But I'm now 20, and although I know exactly what happens because I can't go through my teenage life not being spoiled over The Hunger Games, like that's not happening, I think it is finally time for me to read the whole series. So I have the first and the second one here in this set, but I never got the third. And the reason you know that I got these exact books from this award is because my mum beautifully put the little card that they gave me when I got the award in the front cover of the first book. And this is what it says. So I won the Active Citizenship Award for my class. Name, Monique Robinson. The world is a better place because you consistently strive to take care of those around you. Your unwavering commitment to others is inspiring, always putting others before yourself. You seem to know when someone needs a helping hand or a friend to talk to. Never someone to shout it from the rooftop, you quietly go about your business. You set a standard we can all aspire to, Monique, and you've made a difference in our classroom and our school. From my teachers. So I feel like I need to do them justice 8 years later and finally read the books they gave me. I don't remember this part. I don't know how I do this, honestly. I don't read a lot, and then I read an entire book in a day. So I just finished The Hunger Games, and I don't know how to feel. My heart just doesn't know how to cope right now. I purposefully left the last chapter. I read the rest of the book last night, but I left the last chapter because I knew as soon as I finished it, I would want to start reading the next book. But before I start, I thought I should kind of probably decompress all my thoughts and feelings. Probably a couple months ago, I watched a video on YouTube about what Gale and Peter represent and how they're not just characters, but they also represent 2 different paths that Katniss can take. And that's been playing in my head the entire time I've been reading this book. From having read just the first book so far, I am completely Team Peter. This one book just makes me love him with my whole heart. And I'm ready for my heart to crumble a little and be crushed now that I'm gonna start catching fire. let's start reading. What do you say, Cola? You're okay. Entering this next book, I do now see like she really is conflicted between Peter and Gale. Like she does have a lot of love for Gale. During the games, she keeps reflecting on her memories of him, and by the time she goes back, she is deeply conflicted because she has feelings for both boys, and they both are so different and represent different paths and journeys. And then she is angry because she doesn't get a choice. She has to keep this facade with Peter to keep them all safe, and at this point now, she's already experienced the games with Peter. And in the past, she always kept up with Peter and viewed him from a distance and was intrigued by him. But she shared the scene with Gale, and they had that in common, and they had that life experience and hunting together, and that's what connected them. But now that she's been through the games and she's experienced that thing that is so unique and traumatic and only shared by Peter and somewhat Hamish, but it's still different because it's a different set of games. Gale will never be able to understand what she's experienced going through the game. And just in the same way that Peter could never understand her past in the scene, Gale can't understand her future as being a tribute. Okay, let's keep reading. In the last 2 days, I've read both of these books, and I can't. The flow of the story it doesn't feel like separate books. In my head, it's one continuous story. Okay, while reading Catching Fire, like, you can see where Suzanne's like added things in that have already been explained in the first book, and since I read them back to back in the span of like 2 days, it's a bit frustrating just in those like 1 or 2 sentences, because I'm like, well, you just said that in the other book. But I'm guessing people, months later are reading the next book, or years when it first came out. But it's so capturing. And last night I definitely had some nightmares. But I finished the 2 books I got as gifts for my book prize for school, and one book has the certificate that I won, and the other book, I realised while I was holding it up to the light, has like LA 25, which was my class, Learning Area 25, like indented into the cover. Obviously they had like a sticky note or something on it, and they've written LA 25 to know who to give the books to, and they've left an indent in the book cover, and it's still there 8 years later. Which is just crazy to me. So I don't have the last book in this beautiful set, which really kind of frustrates me, but my brother has it as one of these sets. So it's time to read the last book, and then I can get onto the prequel, and then I can watch all the movies and enjoy them, because I have definitely only seen the first Hunger Games movie. I'm on to the last book, and I think I'll finish it today or tomorrow. That's my hope anyway. Because I've been reading them over the course of a week, basically, they're just playing on repeat in my mind. I actually had a really, really strong nightmare a couple of days ago, and it was like a mix between the Hunger Games and running a marathon, because I ran a half marathon on Sunday. That was really hilarious because it took me quite a while to work out why my dream was so vivid. And then I was like, probably because I was reading Hunger Games before I went to bed. I have just been flying through these books. I'm amazed at how much Suzanne Collins can fit into each book, if that makes sense. Like, almost every line kind of serves a purpose. This series in particular is critiquing modern society in such a strong way, and it's really kind of fascinating to see how much our modern world actually resembles the capital and just the extravagance. Like, there are many people in the world who live in the same sort of hardship that District 12 is in. It's just so emotionally charged and strong and makes you think so much. It's just a masterpiece. I think it's the same feeling I had when I read To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't read it in high school or anything like that. I just decided to pick it up on my own. And I'm sure if I studied it, I would have a different feeling towards it. But just reading it independently, it's kind of like almost a relief that I felt that the book was and is so popular and so well known and known as such a classic and, you know, read by millions and kind of studied in schools. It's almost like a relief to know that the book is part of like prized literary culture, because it just feels so important. The message that the story is conveying just is so relevant even 50 years later, and you kind of have that feeling that everyone needs to read it and be exposed to this message and theme and ideas. And I have the same feeling about The Hunger Games. I'm kind of left with that same feeling of everyone should read this series and experience these emotions and be forced to question their reality. And I'd love though that Collins has like waited so long to release another book. She's not capitalizing on the success of the series and just spurting off more and more books around the world. I have a feeling that she writes with such intention, and she writes when she has something to say and something to share. So I'm very intrigued and interested to see what she's kind of sharing in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Actually, I think one of the reasons I love Katniss so much is how she views the Capitol in a lot of moments. What's the saying of catching fire? Like, remember who the real enemy is. I think so many people are inclined to hate and blame and declare the people better off as evil. Katniss as a character does such a good job at kind of showing, you know, through her thoughts that, wow, like, okay, who would I be if I was raised in the capitals? Perhaps I would have these views because of my life experiences. As someone who is very empathetic and like can really easily place themselves in another person's life and situation, to me that comes very naturally over, okay, well, I can't blame this person, or I understand, even though I don't agree with, I understand where this person's coming from because I can imagine the different scenarios in their life that have shaped them and made them react this way. So many people, they want a person or a people to blame rather than blaming the system itself. The capital people, are they to blame? Because they're just living their life the way that they were raised, the situation they're in, and they're not using their power or place in life to make the world better for people beneath them. But you know, they try to instill the Hunger Games for the capital children, and you're like, oh, so I've got the moral high ground now? My thoughts are all over the place, but this kind of makes me think of capital punishment. Someone being sentenced to death because they've murdered someone. Okay, they've killed someone, you know, for whatever reason, they've killed someone. And perhaps to them, they thought it was morally within their right to kill this person, that they deserved to take that person's life. And now they're charged and put on death row. And you're now saying, well, I now have the right to kill them because they've killed someone. No, you're condemning them because of their actions, and yet you're about to take the same actions against them. Should that not condemn you as well? Why do you have the moral high ground in this situation? And I feel like it's the same. First of all, it will just create a perpetual loop about, oh, I'm doing this in retaliation to what you did, I'm retaliating to what you did just then, and it will go back and forth forever and you'll never be able to find a peace. So it creates that kind of problem. It also creates kind of disconnect and hatred between people, when in fact it's the system that people should be fighting against. So it's so fascinating. I think so many books kind of spin off the Hunger Games in terms of a coming of age dystopians, but I feel like the series is entertaining and interesting to grab your attention so that it can share its messages, which I just think make the best books.